Hi, you're listening to It Happened to Me, a rare disease and medical challenges podcast. The mission of our podcast is to support you, our listeners, and to create community as you confront the toughest challenges in life. All of us will experience health hardships. The real question is how we adapt. That's the focus of It Happened to Me, which wants to help you overcome limitations and live a full and satisfying life. Drawing on their own health challenges, co-hosts Kathy Gildenhorn and Beth Glassman interview guests who share stories and research to help you succeed in the face of difficult health obstacles. It happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.
Today's guest is Kenny Kasnett, a seasoned executive, entrepreneur, and survivor with an extraordinary story. Kenny's impressive professional background spans finance, real estate, and home building. He has held leadership roles, including president of Magruder Companies, partner at Mason-Dixon Funding, executive vice president, Embrace Home Loans, and CFO at Summer 365.
Behind the business titles is a deeply personal journey. Kenny lived with interstitial lung disease, a chronic progressive lung disorder that led to the life-changing decision to undergo a lung transplant. In today's conversation, we're going to explore what that journey has been like, the early symptoms, the mental and physical toll of the disease, and what it takes to prepare for a transplant, and also the recovery that follows.
Kenny, thank you so much for joining us today on It Happened to Me. It's really an honor to have you as our guest. Let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us how you were first diagnosed and where that occurred and what the symptoms were that led you to seek medical help?
Yeah, first, Beth and Kathy, I want to thank you both for having me on the program today. Very much appreciated. My journey began many years ago, probably around 2015, during a round of golf with my friends. I started coughing uncontrollably, and my friends looked at me with concern, saying, "Are you okay? There's something wrong? Are you stressed out?" I actually had been coughing on and off for a few months, but until that moment, I didn't believe that it was that serious. But that incident became a wake-up call for me as I reached out to my internist, who suggested that I see a pulmonary doctor, and I followed his advice, saw a pulmonary doctor, and the first thing we did was had a pulmonary function test, also known as PFT, and a 6-minute walking test. Just like that, I was introduced to the world of pulmonary medicine. My pulmonologist then recommended a CAT scan of my lungs. So now I'm moving on to September of 16, when the CAT scan revealed signs of interstitial lung disease. A follow-up scan in December of that year, 3 months later, showed that the interstitial fibrotic changes were taking place. And also they termed a term called early signs of honeycombing in my right lung. No one explained to me anything about honeycombing, and I knew very little about what was going on because I felt that it was stable. At that time, wasn't dealing with any breathing issues, and also there was no report of any kind of fibrosis that was advanced. So years later, I revisited that CAT scan, and I looked up what honeycombing was all about, and the medical term on the internet is that honeycombing is associated with irreversible scarring and destruction of the lungs. It was not a good sign, and I realized then just how serious things might become.
Wow.
Kenny, can I ask you a question? What is interstitial lung disease? What does interstitial mean?
Great question, because it's very confusing. So interstitial lung disease is also known as ILD. It's a broad term used to describe a large group of lung conditions that cause scarring or also fibrosis, it's known as, of the lungs. It's complicated because ILD is not just one disease. It includes over 200 conditions.
So it's sort of an umbrella. You might call it an umbrella for a classification of diseases. Yes, okay.
Yeah. So a simple explanation to help one visualize this is, think of your lungs as a sponge. Normally, when you buy a sponge and it's brand new, they're soft and flexible, filled with tiny air sacs. that stretch and relax as you breathe in and out. In ILD, the tissue around those air sacs on that sponge becomes stiff and thick, almost like a sponge that has dried out and hardened. So as the scarring builds up and progresses, you can't take deep breaths easily, and your lungs can't absorb the oxygen, and it becomes hard for the oxygen to move from your lungs into your bloodstream. But visualize this example also to help someone, understand it. Imagine that you're breathing through a straw. Now imagine that the straw is slowly getting pinched. That's what living with ILD can feel like. Harder to get air in, harder to get oxygen out.
Wow.
And it has many causes, ILD. Some of the more common ones are known as autoimmune diseases, such as rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes or MS, or environmental, which is mold or dust. And the last one is completely unknown, and it's non-specific, and that's called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which many people have heard of, but they really don't understand what it's all about. It does progress differently in different people. No two people are usually the same. Some respond to treatment, others do not. Diagnosis can be very tricky. It requires lung scans, breathing tests, labs, even a lung biopsy. I had all of those along the way in my journey. The treatment focuses on slowing down the fibrosis, the scarring, not curing it. It cannot be cured.
Did they ever figure out what yours was?
Well, they did. Initially, when I had a lung biopsy in 2018, the takeaway with the pathology that I had was called that environmental lung disease. And that was initiated then in 18, but by the time I had the transplant, it was clearly had evolved to full-blown idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is truly
a mystery.
People, they can't identify it, but truly for people to really get their arm and head around it, it's not curable. And you have to make a decision at some point. Are you going to consider a lung transplant? Or are you going to really just let it go? And I know some people who have not been approved. I was very lucky to even get a lung transplant. There's so many factors that go into it. You can age out, you can have issues with your heart, cancer, overweight, those kind of things. So it all has to line up. All the stars have to line up in order to be able to get to the finish line with the transplant.
Wow. Yeah. Now, is it ever genetic?
I've never heard that it is. I've never heard that it was genetic, so I don't believe so.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, interstitial lung disease is often misunderstood, and especially by you. When you were first diagnosed, you may not have heard of it or known what it was.
I never heard of it. I mean, I worked in an environment where someone did lose a couple siblings from pulmonary fibrosis. I didn't understand the nuances, and there are so many. And when you're initially diagnosed, your head is completely spinning about what's going on, and again, it's a journey that you begin to learn a lot and becomes very real.
So at this point, how would you describe, in your own words, interstitial lung disease?
Well,
especially to someone unfamiliar or someone that's just been diagnosed.
Yeah, well, again, it's a progression. Most people find that their lungs are, the scarring continues and progresses, and you have a very difficult time just getting around. Simple chores, just, daily functioning. When I would walk my dog, and I would be out of breath if everything was changing, and to describe it, it's a progression. Although some people can get it very quickly. For me, it really started in around 2016. I had the transplant June 19th of 2024. It was an evolution and a progression that unfortunately was
pretty rapid.
It became rapid in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, how did the diagnosis affect your day-to-day life, both physically and emotionally?
Yeah, great question as well. So the physical part in the early years were relatively mild. Mostly I had a cough, but my results were stable. I had no major breathing issues at that time. And I had regular check-ins with my doctors. The fibrosis was limited and life carried on much as it had before. But as I just mentioned, the progression was evolving. And by 2023 into 24, nearly a decade after my initial diagnosis, my oxygen levels began to drop. So when I walk hills or certain stairs, I needed portable oxygen, the device, to keep me going. And breathing became difficult. It wasn't, as I was just mentioning, simple chores were difficult. And I had a couple of incidents where things really hit home hard. I, living in Florida, was walking my dog, and all of a sudden there was this intense storm that hit. It was pouring rain, and I was not under cover. So instead of going undercover, I started running to my house, and I did a 5-minute sprint, and I was gasping for air. I couldn't catch my breath, and I didn't think I was going to survive. And at that point, I knew just how serious the condition had become. And then another wake-up call, not long after that, I went to Portugal, traveled to Portugal, and Portugal is very much like San
very
Francisco
hilly
with the hills. Like
yes, all the hills. Yes.
So I couldn't do it. I mean, I honestly could not walk the hills, and I sensed, I knew that I was in big trouble. So things were really changing very quickly. So my body was deteriorating, and I knew, I think I was running out of time at that point. So emotionally, though, I found myself in denial about what was happening. I tried to stay strong and positive, always did. And, suddenly my life was put on hold with what was going on. But through it all, I was continually uplifted by my family. My wife, Susan, simply, she's an extraordinary woman as a caregiver. She's amazing.
Oh, that's great.
And I had the love for my children, grandchildren, and my dear friends who all so supportive of my situation. So their strength gave me hope. And we clung to the belief that a miracle could happen through the dedication of the lung transplant team. We really did.
So Kenny, before you got to the lung transplant phase, certainly you would choose options that are less intrusive for our listening audience. You try to avoid surgery as long as you can. And then you think about other options. And I'm sure the doctors you quickly mentioned, I thought maybe you want to go into a little depth of what those different options were that you check those boxes before going to the transplant option.
That's correct. So I had PFT tests like monthly. Those are the pulmonary function tests. I had CAT scans every 3 to 6 months. And they started me on a medication called mycophenolate to try to slow down the fibrosis. But unfortunately, it was not effective. And then my doctors in New York, when I lived in New York at the time, they said, you need to have a lung biopsy. That's what I described previously as one of the treatments.
Yes.
Before I did that, I was introduced to the National Jewish Hospital in Denver several years prior. It's one of the best pulmonary facilities in America and in the world. People come from all over. So I went and got a second opinion there about, do I really need a lung biopsy, and can they take a look at everything that I was going through? And they were very thorough, and they're professional, and they're on the cutting edge of everything. But I went out there and they said, yes, you should have a lung biopsy. So I came back to New York, had the lung biopsy, and that's when they were able to diagnose at that time my condition being the environmental lung disease. They thought that's what it was at that point in time. So those kinds of things that I did for a number of years were really important, because I never thought about having a lung transplant, to be honest, when all this started, because
of course
I was
not
pretty stable.
Not
but
until
I
your condition.
knew I was in trouble.
Yes, and when your condition worsened, when it started affecting your daily life, when walking your dog becomes a problem, going on a vacation, doing normal activities become a problem, then you start realizing that your life is being impacted by a health issue. And then at some point you can no longer be in denial. And it sounds like you did the very prudent thing. You did different testing that the doctors recommended. And then you come to the point where this is your doctors present you with this option. Before any surgery, we have sort of this, I always think of the scales of justice, that, on one side you have the risk of any surgery, even the most minor surgery, there is a risk. And then the benefits that outweigh the risk. Now here in a transplant, this is a big deal surgery. This is not something that's minor, that's major, and it's life altering. But on the other hand, you had a life that was being so profoundly impacted, and then you're faced with, this is your only option. And then it tips in favor of going toward the transplant. So I'm wondering if you could talk about how this, something you never thought was going to happen, and all of a sudden you're making the decision to go
Right.
forward.
Yeah. So as I went through this process of, first doing the scans and the biopsy and being in denial initially that I can't do this transplant, it's just too overwhelming and scary.
Sure.
The doctors in Denver were very candid with me as I was getting into 2022 to 3. They had looked at the PET scan and it was not good. The progression had taken place very quickly since the last one. You do these 3 months at a time. But one thing the doctor tried to do is at Denver, at National Jewish, they have colleagues and they meet and they talk about cases, and like I'm sure all hospitals, but these are the leaders in the pulmonary industry. These are the experts. These are the guys doing the research. And they said, let's try one more time to give you 3,000 milligrams of prednisone over a weekend in infusion. You imagine most people take 5 milligrams or maybe a little more, but 3,000 milligrams of prednisone.
That's an
awful lot.
They were trying to slow the inflammation because it was progressing. Unfortunately, that didn't help. And my wife was with me and we were in Denver, and the doctors came out and said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's really progressing and you're in bad shape. And your only option to live is have a lung transplant. So that's
and there you are. There you are. Then there
trying to figure that out.
Yes. Yeah. And then you have really no choice. And the choice is to prepare.
And to figure out where you're going to do it, with whom, and do your research and try to learn as much as you can about what's best.
Wow. Well, how did you begin preparing for the transplant?
Yeah. So once I understood the reality of what I was faced with, I figured out that I was living in Florida and I did not want to go back to Columbia and New York City, because once you have a transplant, you are really there for a year or more. You're going in every week for lab tests, for different procedures. And it's a real emotional change to pick up where you live and go to another city and deal with all that. So what happened was I figured out that Miami Transplant, which was really 45 minutes away from where I live, would be a great program for me to look into. So
I see.
I did just that. I called them the next day and I went and saw them, and the process is you have to get evaluated.
Yeah.
With for me, it was a week long of tests to make sure that all your organs are good, your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your lung and swallowing tests. And they want to see, can you withstand the rigors of a transplant? Because if you, like I said earlier, if you're overweight or have cancer or have heart issues, they're not going to take you. You're not going to get put on the list. So once I went through the evaluation, they accepted me. They said, you're a good candidate. That was I was very happy about that, because these were great people that I met. I really felt good. You get a certain vibe when you go into, a medical situation they have teams, transplant teams. So I met the surgeon, I met the pulmonary doctors, I met, the coordinators, the nurses. I mean, it was amazing. So I felt really good. And then next part of the process, they submitted my case to the National Lung Transplant Registry. That took several weeks, but then I got approved. So then the fun and games began with.
How long did you wait? Only 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had the evaluation that week. I passed. They said yes. They went right to the registry, got me approved, and boom, boom, boom. There it was. So with that happening, there were so many emotions getting on the transplant list. It was, as I called it, hope mixed with fear. And you're waiting for the call that could save your life, knowing it also means someone else loses theirs.
Right.
So it's humbling. It's heavy duty. It's also incredibly sacred.
Is there a support group for transplant patients waiting for the transplant and post-transplant?
I'm not aware of that. I think what happened for me, I met some people who were in similar situations as me during the evaluations. So it's someone
but that works. Yeah.
Yeah, it's someone to talk to. What are you dealing with? And that's about it. I mean, they don't talk about, I'm sure if you go online, there are support groups, but I
Right.
really was extremely private and still am about my ordeal until things sort of evolved and progressed. I've been very careful talking about it, but now I'm feeling very proud of what's happened. You know, I hope my telling my story, and I have more to tell you, can help someone else.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Now, how did you adjust mentally and emotionally to preparing for the surgery and then adjusting and transitioning to getting the transplant?
Well, you know, I once I was on the list, and I started to reflect about my life. At the time, I was 70 years old, and I had the good fortune of having a beautiful life, a fulfilling life, and was incredibly lucky in many things, in many respects. But being lucky to have an amazing wife, as I said, children, family members, being so supportive. So there were no regrets if for some reason this transplant was not successful. I had nothing
Oh,
to complain about, but their strength, all of these people carried me through the darkest moments. I was scared,
oh,
and I
Oh, how
prayed,
beautiful.
and I prayed that I would survive. But one thing that everyone always said to me, you were so positive and optimistic, and again, I was. And also I was so thankful for the heroes behind the scenes. Those are the incredible transplant and medical professionals at Miami Transplant. They're just amazing people who care, who really make a difference, and who really care to try to make it successful.
Beautiful.
Penny, what was it like the day of surgery? Talk
Yeah,
about
so
that you sort of you know took a stock of your life, and boy,
mhm,
those words came through loud and clear that
mhm.
you had had a good life. All that is fine and good until
Huh,
there you are in the
showtime.
hospital and it's
Yeah,
going to happen. Oh
Right.
boy. Oh
yeah.
boy, Kenny.
So I received a call the morning of June 19th from the transplant team, and Dr.
Yes.
Salgado, an amazing pulmonary transplant guy. Um, he explained to me that there was an opportunity that day to be a backup for someone else who needed two lungs. I didn't need two lungs, but someone else needed two. And if one was bad and the other lung good, it would be mine because the other
Wow.
person ahead of me needed both. Once he told me that, he said, get to the hospital and we'll begin prepping. So I had been there two other times. Two other
Uh,
times. The lungs were not good. And they prep you regardless. You don't find out until the very end that you're
Oh
getting a lung or not.
no.
So they prep
So
wow.
they
you.
weren't good, that they weren't a match for you. Is that what you mean?
They were not good and they were not a match. They didn't feel comfortable giving me those other
I
lungs
see.
for those other two visits.
Oh
You learn a lot
boy.
about that. But
Yes.
this one where the doctor said, you can be a backup. I went to the hospital with my wife and we got there in
Mm.
the afternoon, like, you know, and they started prepping. And when they prep you, you're hooked up to, you know, IVs and this, that, and the other. And my wife was very observant. She noticed that they were doing more to my left side of my left lung. And she asked them, the transplant group that was there, how do you know that he needs a left lung? And they looked at her like something was up. That, you know, they knew that I was getting that lung, and that, you
Wow.
know, the other lung for that gentleman, I feel bad.
Yeah.
He wasn't so fortunate. So
Oh,
I got green lighted late in the day that this was going to happen. That the lung was a fit for me, and it all the doctors were assembling. It's like this crazy time when people start, things are happening. You can just tell
Yeah.
that they're
Yeah.
getting ready. So
Wow.
yeah, that was leading up to the actual surgery. Yeah.
wow.
So
What a
spoiler
story.
alert, Penny made it through the surgery. And so what happened right after the surgery?
Yeah, well, I just want to
What
say,
was
I wanted to say that during the surgery, it was a surreal experience. They brought me into the operating room, and you know, they tie you down, your legs, your
oh,
hands. You can't move, and you know, again, it was all so surreal. You had the transplant team, the surgeon, the other doctors,
yes.
the nurses. The lights are everywhere. The computers are everywhere. The music's going on. It was just an incredible thing to watch. Clearly, at that point, you know, I knew it was time, and that's, of course, they gave me the anesthesia, and the surgery started.
I'm surprised they didn't give you the anesthesia before tying you down. You know, that's sort
Well,
of
Really?
shocking to me. They could
no,
have knocked you out. Yeah.
and they even asked me what kind of music do you like, and I said I
Uh-huh.
like rock and roll. We put the Eagles on, and then they played music, and that sort of was
And that was then you were lights out. So now you recover, you're out of surgery. What's that like? What's it physically?
So when I was brought to the room and there were wires and tubes everywhere, it was an incredible pain. So what they had done, so they made an incision and they had to remove the old lung and they had to move the ribs to put the new lung in. So it was limited to the left side. I have an incision, but a lot of pain. And they also had what's called an ECMO system in there. That's an artificial, allows you for your lungs and your heart to breathe artificially, and give you the opportunity to get through all this. So, but it was painful. I really have to say, the first couple of days, extremely uncomfortable. If you cough, it destroyed. But again, the great news was the first day they had me sitting in a chair, all those tubes. And day 2, I was walking, and day 5, I was out of the ICU.
Honey, it's so interesting. We interviewed a wonderful young man, Zach Shipp, who had a kidney replacement, very young man. And he told us the same thing, that the first day they said to him, "You're going to sit in the chair." And he said, "Do you realize I just had surgery?" And he said, then second day they said, "We're going for a walk." He said, "Okay, the chair was one thing, walking is another." But this seems to be a theory that you must get up and start moving.
You have to. They push you for a reason.
Sure. And you don't want to do it, but they get you going.
Yeah.
Right.
So I got out of the ICU in 5 days, and then I got out of pulmonary rehab in 7. So I was out of the hospital in 12 days.
That's unbelievable. What kind of rehabilitation or therapy was involved after this transplant?
So pulmonary rehab, I went for several months to get the rehab, and that was really good. And they want me to walk and deal with light weights, and just not to sit around. You got to be smart about it. You know your own body, but you can't just sit around and be lazy. You got to really. It's all about you now. They did what they were supposed to do.
They did their job.
Do the thing they tell you to do, and they're not messing around.
That's right.
Wow. Well, were there any unexpected complications or learning curves during the recovery process?
Yeah, so I actually was hospitalized twice after the.
What happened?
Well, I had an infection. I was coughing up stuff and mucus, and they actually did what is called a bronchoscopy. So they go in to your lung and they can take a little piece out, and the culture is sent out. So again, they confirmed that I had an infection, and 2 of the things you cannot have in order to survive is an infection or rejection. So they were concerned about and they put me on a lot of. I've been on IVs for 3 months. My wife gives me IVs in my arm twice a day.
My goodness.
So I think that's getting much better. And then I had one other issue that had to get resolved. So I was in the hospital 2 times, but briefly, thankfully. Again, it's just a matter of keeping it all together and just pushing ahead. That's really what it is.
So Kenny, would you say, how long did it take you to start feeling like yourself? You had turned the corner?
We left Florida on June the 2nd. I'm still in New York, the New York area. So it took me just about a year to get the green light to, leave my home.
Wow.
The key is, if you're traveling, I still have labs up here every week or every 2 weeks. I had a pulmonary function test recently. But when you're traveling, you have to make sure you have the resources to do the things you need to do. That's why I've been very careful. I'm going to places where I know there are good doctors and I can have access to care if I need it. And fortunately now, I'm here almost 10 weeks and everything's going very well. My numbers are really good with my labs, and I'm, I did recently though have COVID. I'm just over that. That was a little bit of a setback. That knocked me out a little bit. And also I did have a hip replacement back in December of 24. So that sent me back, but I was able to get through all that, thankfully.
That's remarkable.
Well, that's great. So, so when you think about travel, in other words, you're not going to go on a safari. You're going to go to a city that has everything that you would need a major metropolitan city. And
Correct.
that's not such a big deal.
No.
I mean, that's really very doable. You can enjoy yourself and have a wonderful life going to major cities.
Yeah, it's just good. You have to use good common sense and, be
Yes.
proactive. You need to figure it out, and God forbid something goes wrong. Yeah.
Now, is there any time that rejection and infection is less of a concern than it is the first decade or so, the first 5 years?
Yeah, I know I can't answer that, but I do. My understanding is you can always have rejection, even if things are going well. You can get an infection by, again, I don't even know how I got COVID recently, but you can somehow get sick and things can go haywire. So rejection is very,
Yeah.
it never sort of stops. I mean, God willing, you could live a long, normal life with one lung, but you have to be proactive and really take your meds as needed and do the things they tell you. It's critical. It's critical for the success of your lungs.
Kenny, how has this experience changed your perspective on life, on work, on health in general?
Well, I believe that I am in a new chapter of life. I've been given a chance for a second life. So with that in mind, it's not just about healing physically, it's about living more fully. And I am embracing the chance to expand my world, exploring new interests, reconnecting with life in deeper ways, and making the most of every breath. It's a journey of gratitude, growth, and renewal. And again, I take nothing for granted, and I assume nothing. I try to make each and every day meaningful.
Well, you were
That's
given a
awesome.
second chance, so I think
chance.
that's second chance. And
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, do you connect back to the support question? Do you connect with others going through lung disease or recovery today? And what kind of support has been most meaningful to you?
So I have had the opportunity to meet a couple lung transplant recipients and also talk to them on the phone. We have a common bond. We can relate to each other. It's unique. It's a unique experience and situation.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing challenge, and you have to be strong. One of the underlying factors in all this is I'm pretty strong, and you can't give up.
Sure.
I always, when I talk to these people and they talk to me, we encourage each other. We're all about positivity and optimism that we're going to live a long life, but we take one day at a time and we continue to push ahead. There are some great stories out there about survivors. I talked to several people who, had transplants years ago and they're doing just fine. So it's a great thing.
That's
a
wonderful.
wonderful thing. I was going to ask you, this may sound too personal, but faith sounds like something that's very important to you.
It is. I mean, when you are dealing with something as critical as this was for me and still is, I just felt like, I got to clear all the BS in the world, things that, you get caught up in and they're just not that important. So I really, from within, have felt the connection. Just, I can't explain it as far as to whom it is with, but you get, you start to look at life very differently, and you look for a little strength and support from a lot of people.
This is the perfect question for you, Kenny. What advice would you give for someone who is facing the condition that you had, or is being told they need to consider a transplant? What would you say?
Well, I learned this with my own experience. I would suggest that anyone who has interstitial lung disease should try to the best of their ability to find a pulmonary doctor who specializes and understands interstitial lung disease, ILD. I found that several pulmonary people that I dealt with were great doctors, but they really weren't connected to the transplant world and ILD. They are involved with sleeping disorders, or even with your breathing, or COPD, but as it relates to pulmonary doctors who are part of a transplant team or really on top of ILD, to me, it is critical, if it can be done, to have that resource for you.
Yeah.
It's so important because, again, this is a very specialized situation. I mentioned with ILD, there are three very common types of ILD, but you're now dealing with a clock. For most people, it becomes you got to figure it all out. And when it really gets hot and heavy, it gets harder and harder to be more rational.
Oh, did you find though, from your experience, that private doctors were ILD and pulmonary specialists, or was it more from hospitals?
Well, I found that hospitals for sure. I was at Columbia National Presbyterian for several years, where they followed me. I lived in New York City for a while. And they were very good because they did transplant. And I had access to pulmonary doctors who were part of the transplant world there. But in general, when I went to several pulmonary doctors' private practice, it was just different. They really, and they're excellent doctors, but it's just not their specialty. And I found that the hospitals, yes, who do the transplant, and also just something, if anyone ever has a situation where they have ILD, if they can ever connect with National Jewish in Denver, Colorado, it's an amazing place. They don't do transplants there, but they do research, and people from all over the world come. And also, when I had my infection at Miami recently, they sent the culture to National Jewish. So again, I got in to National Jewish just by calling, making an appointment, and they started following me. And I would go out once a year. So it was nice to have a second opinion from Columbia or from a different, group that was following me. But I would say very important, if possible, get a pulmonary doctor who really understands
What's
the
going
ILD
on.
world. It's very important.
Well, having a good team sounds like you really need a good team that is up on latest techniques, and is really important.
Makes a huge difference. Yes.
Yeah. Now, before we close, I wanted to give you an opportunity to just share with our audience. You've talked about resilience, positivity, parting words that you would like to share with our listeners.
It's a very emotional question for me, but I think that my takeaway from my journey is there is real hope in today's treatments, and even more in tomorrow's science. In the last 10 years, there's been remarkable progress in the lung transplant world. I mean, previously, lung transplants, there weren't a lot of them being done in the country. But now things have changed. Brilliant surgeons are doing these transplants, and you have a real opportunity to have a lung transplant, and you can save your life. I mean, you need to stay close to your medical team. Don't be afraid to ask doctors what's going on. Make sure you understand it. Be very strong, positive, and understand that you can survive your challenge. Medicine continues to provide us with these options. I think the most important thing is every breath is a victory. Push ahead. I would encourage everyone who is not a organ donor to please consider becoming one. You could save a life. You could give someone like me a chance, for a second life, the gift of life, which brings me to honor my donor and his family. I carry this lung, and I carry their legacy every single day and respect it. So for that, I'm forever thankful for all of it.
What a beautiful, beautiful sentiment.
Beautiful. And I'd love in our program notes, if we could put any good resources for our audience that would consider organ donation, or for our audience that might be doing some homework about transplants. And I'd love to include the links in our program notes that might be of assistance to people getting started on this journey. But on that note, Kenny, thank you for joining us on It Happened to Me today. Your story's inspirational, educational, and completely enlightening. Your honesty is appreciated, and your strength and determination present a real role model for our audience. Thank you. And here's to your future, to good health for us all. And again, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you for listening to this episode of It Happened to Me. We encourage you to learn more at ithappenedtomepod.com. Please use the contact form on our website to submit your guest suggestions, comments, questions, ideas, and feedback for the show. You can also email us directly at ithappenedtomepod@gmail.com. We would really appreciate it if you can leave us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app like Apple or Spotify. This helps others in the rare disease and medical challenge community find us. It Happened to Me is created and hosted by Kathy Gillenhorn and Beth Glassman. I'm Keira Deneen from DNA Today, and I serve as our executive producer and marketing lead. Amanda Andrioli is our associate producer. Ashlyn Anokian is our graphic designer. And remember, it happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.